when I started to talk about being a gay man wanting children, I would get negative looks. I would get from some people in the gay community, there was not only resistance, there was antagonism, that I'm buying into heteronormality and that I'm buying into the old system and I'm betraying my community. And I tried to explain that this is not a choice of one or the other. I want to be both. I want to be a gay man and a parent. And some of the gay community told me, well, you can't do both.
Today on Rainbow Country, my dream of fatherhood, an unconventional journey. Author Rami Isaac opens up about the challenges he faced being a gay man, becoming a father.
Hi, I'm writer Adam Smith, author of Deep Sniff, A History of Poppers and Queer Futures. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
I decided in the end to write them a letter and leave it for them to find after I was gone. The professional diagnosis for someone who acts this way is chicken shit. But it was either that or nothing at all. Once both of my parents were asleep Saturday night, I snuck down to the kitchen, paper, pen, and envelope in hand, and took my assigned seat at the kitchen table. Subconsciously, I had been thinking of what I would say and how I would say it countless times. But now to do it, that was tricky. How far back should I go? How much detail should I offer? What tone to take? An apologetic one? A strong and affirmative one? Should I acknowledge their probable feelings about this, or should I wait for them to share those with me? Inform them that others already knew, or leave that for follow-up communication? Again, procrastination. And it was getting later than late, now early Sunday morning, and I wanted to make sure that the letter was complete before anyone woke up. The letter needed to be coherent. I did not want to cross out any words or sentences as I changed my mind for fear it would devalue the significance and substance of what I was saying. This needed to look mature and thoughtful as opposed to random thoughts in the night that I was flinging onto the page. I decided to make the letter somewhat chronological, sharing with my parents that for years, since I was in middle school, I had felt different. As time progressed, I learned more about what I was trying desperately to reject and deny, and that all of the years in Toronto, I had not acted on any of those instincts. But once I was more self-sufficient and living in Los Angeles, I no longer wanted to deny myself the happiness and entirety of what my life could offer. I still wanted to be in a happy and monogamous relationship. I absolutely wanted to have children and a family, and I hoped that in time they would be part of all the components of my life, only with a son-in-law rather than a daughter-in-law. I was still me, the same good, dedicated person, loving and compassionate person I had always been. I was still flawed, of course, but not because I was gay, but because I enjoyed too many sweets and got to bed too late and often gave too much of myself to my friends at the cost of my own needs. But being gay was not a flaw.
Rami Isaac, hello. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I am well. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. I have to say thank you for being here, to have your voice, your story be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you for this, especially to talk about your memoir, My Dream of Fatherhood, An Unconventional Journey. That's the full title.
That is the full title.
My Dream of Fatherhood. You and I are both part of the LGBT community. You are a gay man. I am gay as well. The overall story that you're getting at within the pages of your memoir, let's start there. What's the message that you're getting at in sharing your story so far in your memoir?
The message that I would love for people to take away is believe in yourself, trust yourself, don't give up. there's so many times that I heard, no, that's not okay. That's not appropriate. That's not how it's done. And for decades, I would take that in and somehow judge myself and blame myself for being odd or different. And I realized at a certain point, I wanted what I wanted, and I wasn't hurting anyone by wanting it. So putting this book together in my dream of fatherhood, I always wanted to be a dad. And I just realized as many times as people said no, did that mean an absolute no? Or is that no, we're not comfortable with it? No, that's not how it's done generally. But I got no and no and no so many times, and I still didn't take it as an absolute. And then I made happen what I wanted to have happen. So not giving up, that's really the message.
Growing up as a gay person and becoming a gay man, growing up, did you think that you would be able to have a family, to have uh, kids, to be a father? Did you think that when you were young, growing up?
It's a great question. Growing up, and I grew up in Toronto. I now live in Los Angeles, but I grew up in Toronto in an immigrant family. We were in an immigrant community. I didn't realize I was gay in my early years. It wasn't until my teens. And I just assumed that everybody gets married and has children. And then I realized, oh, I'm different.
Mm.
I don't know how this is going to happen, but I still need to be me and get married and have children. And then I thought, as I got a little bit older, oh, I don't think I'm going to be getting married in that way, but I need to have children. And as I got older, the need to have children never went away. So I believed that I would have them. I just didn't know how it was going to happen.
Mm. Okay, quote, even back then, at a young age, with air raid sirens wailing, I remember thinking this was what it must be like to be responsible for a family and responsible for a child. I wasn't afraid. I actually felt good, knowing I was somehow in charge and was capable of doing this. Somehow being the dad felt right, unquote. That's uh, near the beginning of your memoir.
Yes.
Is it fair to say that what you share there is essentially the flashpoint, the spark, when you sort of realize that, hey, I might be 5 years old, but I want kids. I want a family. I want to be a dad. Was that the spark? Was that the moment?
Not consciously, but I believe, and the reason I added that in the book, I put that in, is because that is a memory that I really still have all these years later. So it was an unconscious flashpoint for me,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't become conscious until much later. But yeah, that is a feeling I had ever since I was a 5-year-old boy.
And what was life like for you growing up when you were growing up in I believe in Israel? What was that period of life like for you?
It, family was always around. It
Mm,
was something that from pre-memory through the time that we left Israel, my parents were Holocaust survivors and left
mm,
Eastern Europe after the war. Fortunately, they and their families survived. But many immigrated to Israel, and we had cousins and aunts and uncles who lived literally across the street and just some down the block and a short drive away. So growing up, I was always around cousins and aunts and uncles, and family was a major part of every week. My dad had to go into the army when war broke out, or in Israel at the time and still today, people go into the reserves. And so for weeks at a time, he would be gone. And I remember being at home with my mother and my baby brother And I became the other parent in many ways. I became the partner to my mom in some ways, that she relied on me and I stepped up and did what I needed to do and what she needed me to do. So growing up was the only growing up experience I had, but it was a lot of responsibility. I didn't mind it, but I was in charge of going and getting groceries. I was in
Mm.
charge of walking myself to school and back. I was in charge of helping with my brother while my mother was a single mother during the times that my father was in the army. And then when I was 5, my dad decided that he had been through so many wars and now he had 2 sons. He didn't want us growing up in Israel where his boys might have to be called out to war. So he left for Canada, for Toronto, to make a better life. And he was gone for almost a year. So at that time, I really did become the other parental figure for my brother, even though I was a kid myself.
Wow. Looking back now, how do you look back on those on that time? Do you think that do you look back, do you feel any source any sense of you were robbed from a childhood or anything like that, or you, like you said, you stepped up?
I don't feel I was robbed. People have asked me that question, and that's never been a feeling that I had. I don't
Mm.
feel resentment. I don't feel disappointment. There is a sadness in kids not getting to be kids when they are age appropriate kids. I think that's what prompted me in my professional life. I went to law school and did the law thing for many years, and I didn't feel satisfied. And going into psychology after that and working with human development and child development and being a child advocate right now, clinically, I get to be a kid with kids and to help them maintain a certain sense of their innocence and their idealized life view. And I guess I'm living a form of a childhood now as an adult
Mm.
that I didn't get to do as a kid, but I don't feel regret. I feel almost buoyed by the fact that, wow, I got a lot of information that a lot of kids don't get. So I'm trying to use it now in the most reparative way for myself, but also in a helpful way for society.
You grew up, you came of age uh, during a time when, being gay and and being a parent, they weren't necessarily copacetic. Growing up
Yeah.
in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, even to today, some people still think today that gay people shouldn't be raising kids. When you started that journey for yourself, did you run into any sort of resistance, any sort of homophobia when you started your journey to becoming a parent, to becoming a dad?
In a word, absolutely. Uh, I know that when I moved from Toronto to Los Angeles and I was able to really kind of live a more free out life,
Mm.
um, I, I started to embrace being a gay man. And it took me a while to get comfortable with it, as I think it does for many people of my generation. I think today's kids have it easier, not easy, but easier because being gay in middle school and high school is more accepted, generally speaking. But I know that when I started to talk about being a gay man wanting children, I would get negative looks. I would get from some people in the gay community, there was not only resistance, there was antagonism, that I'm buying into heteronormality and that I'm buying into the old system and I'm betraying my community. And I tried to explain that this is not a choice of one or the other. I want to be both. I want to be a gay man and a parent. And some of the gay community told me, well, you can't do both. So I found that with the straight community, I found resistance in people saying to me, well, I don't know that that's really going to be appropriate. And all I wanted to do was be a dad and change diapers and do carpool. But I know that looking into surrogacy, gay single men at the time were not really being accepted for those um, modalities of having children. Looking into adoption, single people always had a harder time than partnered or married people, and gay people were almost not ever looked at as appropriate candidates. And so it was tough. I was looking in every corner and in every way possible, but I got a lot of resistance and a lot of the word no.
You write about being a gay man and the difficulty of finding a woman that would be willing to have a child with you. What was that journey like for you?
Going back to this concept of family, I never really thought of myself as not having a family, whether it's a family of birth or a family of choice. And my gay community friends were my family of choice, especially since I was living far away from my family of origin. And I thought I really would love a mother for my child. I didn't know, again, how that would all play out and how it would be kind of facilitated or navigated, but I wanted a woman and a mother for my child. And believe it or not, I would just be out there in the world. And if people said to me, oh, so what do you do? Oh, well, I'm a lawyer, or I'm a therapist, and I'm a gay man, and I hope to start a family someday. Like there was this pat response that I would answer, always throwing in the need or the desire for having a child or children or a family. And the more women I spoke to, the more I got comfortable saying it. And interestingly, many women thought that that was commendable.
Hmm.
They didn't offer their services. And it's not that I expected some woman to say, oh, let me do this for you.
Mm.
But I put it out there over and over again to gay women, to straight women, to partnered individuals, to single women, hoping that some woman would think, oh, this could be interesting. I would love a child, maybe having a part-time child in some way. But I just put it out there and experienced what I experienced, not taking it too personally.
So, Rami Isaac, you were born in Israel.
Yes.
When you were younger, your family immigrated to Toronto. You attended university in England. You pursued law in Los Angeles, ultimately becoming a psychotherapist, now an author, a father, fatherhood.
Yes.
Looking back at your journey, are you surprised at the journey that you have taken? Does it surprise you, or is the journey that you've taken something that was always there in your mind, in the back of your mind?
What a great question, Mark. Am I surprised at the journey? Yes, I am surprised at the journey. I could never have imagined or expected the some ups and many downs of my journey. But if I look at it from a more global perspective, I see that the journey needed to happen in some capacity, but the outcome was not optional. I needed to become a dad, And how that was going to happen, I was in for the unknown. I was willing to roll up my sleeves, figuratively speaking, and just do whatever was needed. And so I don't know what the journey was supposed to look like. I just know that I wasn't going to quit the the journey to wherever it took me until it took me to being a father.
Mm. Wow. You mentioned that you did not necessarily recognize your same sex attraction until in your teens. So for yourself, when did that start kicking in for you that you recognized your same sex attraction? Talk to me about when that started crystallizing for you.
I write a chapter in the book that I was a counselor at a summer camp while living in Toronto. Again, being part of an immigrant family, we did not want for anything, but we didn't have a lot of disposable income. My parents were both working hard. So I never went to summer camp like my friends did. But at a certain point, I got myself a job at a camp in Los Angeles where I could be a counselor. And they paid for me to fly to Ojai, California at Camp Ramah, a Jewish camp. And I went there for several summers as a counselor. So I got paid a stipend, but I got a vacation and I got to meet new people. My very first summer there, I was 18 years old. And I, and as I said, I write about this in the book. I knew that people were nice and the boys were cute and the girls were cute. But I went on a walk with a fellow male counselor one evening who started talking to me about, um, do I have any crushes on anybody at the camp? And I said, no, everybody's really nice. And I said, what about you? Do you have any crushes on any of the girls here? And he said to me, well, I don't really think about girls or boys. I just think about having a crush on someone and how they are in the world and their spirit and their energy. And that was the moment that I started to think, wait, is it okay to have a crush for a boy to have a crush on someone who's not a girl? In other words, is he telling me that it's okay for a boy to have a crush on another boy? And as I write about this in the book, that night, nothing happened between us other than just a wonderful conversation. And I got into my bed that night, and that was the realization of questioning, am I gay?
Mm.
But that was really the start. I was 18 years old, and someone talking to me about a more expansive way of thinking about something that I never either gave myself the permission to think about,
Mm.
or I never came across anyone who exposed that part of themselves in that way. But it was a fascinating and again, a very memorable point in my life that was when I started to question, am I gay? Which led to me exploring homosexuality
Mm.
in general and attraction to other boys and men.
So looking back though, did you have any crushes or anything like that prior to this, but you just didn't allow yourself to recognize it?
Yes, yes. I smile at that because after I realized that, I started going down this rabbit hole in my
Mm.
mind. And still to this day, I think back on boys that I was at school with, or boys that I used to swim with, or times that, in my jogging or tennis days. That there were boys that I really liked that I now realize, oh, I had a crush on him. Oh, he had those twinkly blue eyes. Or, oh, he had that bouncy curly hair that I really admired.
Mm.
And I think back and I realize, oh, that's what that was. But I couldn't name it at the time and I had no conscious understanding of it.
Your desire to be a dad, to to be a father, and also being gay. Were those two things ever a conflict for you internally?
Internally, no. To me, I can honestly say that I never thought that being gay would impede upon in any way being a dad.
Hmm.
Because I knew that as a gay man, I would be an educated person because I liked studying. I knew I would be a professional person because I knew I wanted to work and make a living. I knew I wanted a home of some kind, whether an apartment or a house, but I wanted guests and I wanted family. And I never thought of myself as a party person. It wasn't like I need to go out and go to raves or things all night long, or I was not a promiscuous person ever in my life that I would just bring strangers home or just stay out all night long at someone else's house. So it never seemed to me that there would be a conflict. I enjoyed cooking. I would make my own meals. I would cook for me and the child. I would have a car. I would drive the child to school. I would arrange my schedule with work so that I could pick up or drop off or have neighbors who would help me or a nanny if I needed to hire someone for part-time activities. But it never seemed to conflict. Being gay and being a dad to me were normal, just as being male and being a father were. That's all it was for me.
So, how is fatherhood?
Fatherhood is wonderful. It's not without its challenges. I write in the book, the book ends really with my daughter being a small child, but she is now a happy, healthy, college graduated 25-year-old. So she is well on her way in the world. Uh, but fatherhood was its own journey in that first I was a dad to an infant, and then I was a dad to a toddler, and then I was a dad to a school-aged girl, and then I was a dad to an adolescent girl. And each of those journeys can be identified as completely different ones themselves. And I can honestly say that I would not have traded or would trade one moment of the journey or the act of being an active father. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's been wonderful because it is the fulfillment of my dream.
And going back to when you were 5 years old, looking after your younger brother and feeling like, oh, this is what it must be like to be a dad, and I'm good at this. That was 5-year-old you. Looking back from where you are now and that journey that you've been on, the journey of fatherhood for you, has has the fantasy and the reality lived has the reality lived up to maybe the fantasy that you may have had when you were a young kid? Or talk to me about that, the idea of fatherhood compared to the reality of it.
What a deep and multifaceted question. Um, Thank you for making me think this way. I love that. If I stop and think back, that 5-year-old Rami, who was the de facto dad in my own mind anyway, um, and what being a dad was later like, I got great practice in my early life. And being the father in real life, in adulthood, surpassed the dream that I had back then. I liked it as a boy. I felt good about how I did it, but I didn't know, nor was it appropriate for me to know, all of the tiny little micro moments of joy that being an actual dad would provide. going into my daughter's room when she was an infant and seeing her sleeping and her little chest just going up and down, standing there and literally streaming tears of joy. I never experienced that as the little boy, because as the little boy, Rami, I was very practically driven. I needed to get my brother out of his crib. I needed to get his bath ready. I needed to set out his clothes. It was about the functional, performative aspects of being a father. But the fatherhood of the adult Rami had so many emotions that came along with the diaper changes and the bath time and laying the clothes out. It was the twinkle in the eye, it was the smile, it was the boo-boo that she had when she fell down, and me sitting with her in my lap and being able to soothe her and taking her from crying to smiling. The emotions that came with it over the years, there's no way for me to have known as a boy what fatherhood would be like as a man.
Mm. The title, My Dream of Fatherhood. Is there a story behind this particular title?
Um, a little bit of a story, trying to figure out what I should name this story. Um, should it be something a little bit more metaphorical? Should it be something more definitive? And in the end, I kind of tried to reduce down what is it that I'm telling here? What was the impetus of this story? And the story was about my dream come true. And so it became almost like the lowest common denominator and the most sensible and logical title. It was my dream of becoming a father. And that was it. So it went through various iterations until this one. And I remember looking at this on paper and thinking, wow, that's so simple and it makes so much sense. I'm just going to go with it. So
Mm.
that's how it came about.
Well, I have to say, Rami Isaac, well said, well done, well written. Thanks for your
Thank you.
time. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure. At one point, Mason wandered off somewhere, and I went for a Diet Coke refill. In front of the drinks table stood a woman. I didn't know her. I introduced myself. She was of average height, maybe 5 feet 4 or 5, approximately my age, 30 or so, with brown curly hair that just hit her shoulders, green eyes, and a pretty smile. She and Amy knew each other from a show that they had both worked on, and I asked her how she liked being in her industry. The more she disclosed, the more I realized she was well educated, was interesting, had a wicked sense of humor, and had traveled quite a bit, mostly for her work. She was currently single, although I didn't know or ask if she had been partnered with a man or a woman because it didn't matter. It was evident to me that she was financially comfortable, given how she described her lifestyle, and that she was close with her family. We shared academic stories, including my journey out of the law and into psychology. I was in the midst of completing my necessary hours prior to sitting for the licensing exams, then hoping to go into private practice. Mason found his way back to me, at which time I introduced him to my new friend. I put my right arm through Mason's left one, showing her that we were a happy couple, and stated unequivocally, I hope to get my license, set up an office, and start a family. I was trying to find somewhere between subtle and direct. She looked at me curiously, asking what I meant, which allowed me to go into my spiel. As I was winding my way through my story, she interrupted me by saying that she had had a child for a couple in the past, which was one of the most gratifying experiences she had ever had. My ears perked up, and I felt a surge of adrenaline go through me. I believe that gay people deserve the same rights as straight people when it comes to having children, She was emphatic and passionate about this. This is so refreshing to hear since our society seems to be way behind the curve on this one, in my opinion, I responded. I know it's not the norm, but if I can help those who can't do this for themselves, then that's what I want to do.